Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to What You Say Anime. I am your host, Peter. On today's episode, we will be talking world building. What is it? What do we like to see in our world building? And is literally creating worlds actually the best form of world building? Joining me today is my lovely co-host, Miles. Miles, how you doing today?
Oh, it's been a pretty hectic day, but I am excited to talk about some world building. So, everyone, if this is a little scatterbrained, I apologize. I'm just looking after my baby who is sick, and my wife who is sick, and me who is getting sick.
Fun stuff. And if I'm scatterbrained, it's because I'm dumb.
Look, man, we're not talking about deconstruction here, so
Thank
I think
God.
you'll be fine.
Thank God. I think I understand this concept a little bit better. Not much,
goodness.
though.
I think I understand this worse. I had this long talk today with one of my friends about if setting and world building were the same thing, and I don't think so, but they were making some arguments. So
I would also agree. Oh well, maybe we can talk about it.
yeah, we can bring it up. We could see what people think. There's a few reasons I think no, but yeah, let's get into it.
Reasons I might say yes. Let's do it.
Yes. So, world building, right? It's constructing your fictional or world, or I guess maybe adding some changes to our modern world or whatever. So think of things like everything ever, but the geography, weather patterns, ecology, societal things, religions, other cultural important things, cities, river, all of that stuff goes into world building. And it's just details that are put in to make the world feel alive, interconnected, and to feel like it's the world itself is broader than this story that we're following in a lot of ways. So obviously, anime podcast, we're going to be talking about world building specifically in anime. So Pete, if I start talking about Worm or Brandon Sanderson novels, please tell me to shut the fuck up.
I will gladly.
Okay. So Pete, world building, right? I feel like that's something everyone always says that is important to them about the shows and stuff they watch, and I definitely agree with that, especially depending on the genre. But in world building, what do you like to see? How much does it add to your enjoyment of the show? So just talk about your experience a little bit.
Yeah, for me, it can vary from, I guess, maybe more along the lines of the context of the show that I'm watching. So if it's something that deals with magic, what are the rules along their society that uses magic? How is it used? Why is it used? I think a lot of times power scaling can kind of run into this as well. What makes somebody stronger than the other person, and giving me that explanation. It could also be something along the lines of why things are happening in a society that they are now. So, why is the past affecting the current situations right now in the story, that type of thing. So that's kind of what I look for. There are some shows where when it's set in real, I'll say real life in quotation marks, if it's a slice of life or if it's a romance, I don't need the world building to be as important, because if it's the setting is modern day Tokyo, I understand what it is already. You don't have to explain to me some of that information. But if it's something, currently airing Frieren or something like that, how is Frieren getting these spells? And they go on to explain why and how and stuff like that. That's what I look for more in a fantasy style show, an action style show. And that's what draws me to world building, because the ones that do it great stand out so much, where it's one of those elements to me that elevates a show. It could be the music, it could be the animation, it could be the voice acting, but it could also be the world building. Explaining why things are happening is it can be a pivotal thing in the story that I look for.
Yeah, I think that is good. So I guess to flip side of that coin, what my favorite thing in world building is personally, and it's explaining things is obviously important, right? You can't show, not tell some complex magic system. At some point you just have to have that expo dump, right? Here, Gon and Killua, this is what Nen is. This is how we use it. This is why it's important to Hunter. You have to have that. You can't just piece that together. But when you have those broad strokes that have been explained, like you said, you learning the reasons why and stuff, I like seeing small things that those affect in the background or in scenes where things people react maybe differently than they would in our world based on the information that's given in their world. So like my favorite example of that is in Psychopaths, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. But there's a scene where someone is just getting beat to death with like a lead pipe or something, and everyone is just walking around it, sort of confused, as opposed to what would happen in our world. They'd freak out, right? People wouldn't just be going about their day. It's because they're so unused to violence happening because of the system they live in. You know, because everyone, if they would commit a crime or not, is like preemptively judged in that world. And so actually seeing stuff carried out is such a rarity to them. They treat it as a curiosity. So, you know, you learn how all of those systems work and they explain that, but I like seeing those little details, little filigree added to that central world building. So I think we want to start with talking about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, which is an anime that a lot of people consider being like a staple. Is first is anime, right? Like it's the highest rated anime ever, or second. I don't know.
It's currently number one. Free run drop 0.01 today.
Okay, it is currently number one. It often ends up back there. You know, it's a phenomenal show with lots of good elements, but you know, one of those great elements, and maybe the most important element in the show, besides I guess the characters, is the world building. It has a really interesting and dynamic world that feels very wide, in my opinion. So, Pete, it's what, your second, third favorite show of all time? That's my second
favorite show, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so let's have you start off then. Yeah. What do you like about the world building in Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood?
I think the one thing that stands out to me with Fullmetal is just how simple but precise alchemy is in this world. It's laid out very simple. If you want to transfuse, what's the word that they use?
Transmute.
So if you want to transmute, you know, you need equal parts, one thing to equal the other. It's a very simple thing. It's like Newton's laws of motion. You know, like every action requires an opposite reaction. You can't make something out of nothing, essentially. I think it's a very simple premise, and they use it in the world of alchemy, which also can be like applied to, I guess, real life too. So that's kind of cool. But they make it anime like, where they're doing it with people and magic and stuff like that. So I think that's the first and foremost where it sets itself kind of like apart from other animes, because it's so simple, but yet the rules are followed throughout the show the entire time. The only time where it's sort of exaggerated is with the Philosopher's Stone, but then that is also explained why the Philosopher's Stone can be such an enhancement to somebody's alchemy. And the kind of like the lengths that it goes to create a Philosopher's Stone is a lot. It's not something simple. It's not something the average person can do. And that's why it's so important to the story and so important that people are trying to get this and how powerful it can be. So I think first and foremost, that's where it starts, and it just continues in other different elements. One thing that stands out to me is the geography of Fullmetal Alchemist, where it lays out not just on like a map, where like we can see the world itself, but like how it's being used, why it's being used in a certain way. You know, it's creating this transmutation circle using the geography of the land. And to me, that's something where I don't really know if other anime have done something like that to that level, maybe outside of maybe something war related, but I think something simple as that, where it's showing us on the map, these countries are used for this specific reason. It's quick. I think it gets people involved, and it's not too much where I think the majority of people can understand that aspect of the world building. How about you, Miles? I'm talking a lot.
Yeah, no, please do. It's one of your favorite shows. I agree with like the map and stuff, right? Like that's something you see in a lot of like fantasy novels and everything, like harkening back to Tolkien. But it's something that I don't think a lot of anime fantasy shows have quite adopted, which is like the intense love of cartography.
As a geography minor, I love it.
There we are. My favorite thing about the world building in Fullmetal Alchemist is the world has history, and that history is felt, right? Like in real life, we feel historical events, some of them like reverberate throughout time, right? So like, you know, positive ones like gay marriage being legalized, or negative ones like something like 9/11 or something, right? You can see the consequences and how society revolves around this. So the Ishval Civil War in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is a giant, like a big war that happened, and in this, so many things are felt, right? So you have state alchemists who retire after it because they are, ashamed of what they did. It's what motivated like Roy Mustang and Riza Hawkeye. Like they saw what the higher ups like commanded them to do and what they had to do from their orders and stuff. And so their motivation is based off of that. Scar, who's an Ishvalan, who's an antagonist and then like a protagonist as the story goes along, right? His motivation is based off of that. And so, almost every character, like even something as simple as like Winry's family and the Automail having a boon in like production because there was a war going on, and like Automail getting to take off because of that, right? There's just these small little things. Every character's backstory, because they lived in this period of time, is affected by this civil war in the same way that people growing up in the 30s and 40s and stuff, if you're looking at a country in the 50s, a lot of people were touched by like World War II or whatever,
Yeah, 100%.
So that's what I really liked about it, that the world felt alive. There was different factions. People were affected by the same event in like different ways. Like some people were like, I went and I made a name for myself during the war and it was good. Some people looked back on what they did with regret. Other people were opportunistic about it and were like, I wanted this conflict to happen so that I could do X, Y, or Z. And I like that because I feel like a lot of times you have events and just fiction in general, they're either viewed as good or bad. And like this war is obviously bad, but that doesn't mean there aren't people who are willing to take advantage of it. And it's just, I think that adds depth to the world, right? You feel the different factions.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think there's other elements that play into it that I think that does a really good job. I'm gonna kind of steal your take, but sort of like the real world application of alchemy as well in its world is shown. It's not only just for war. But however, it does seem like it in its world, it's definitely, it's prioritized in some form of like government setting. So I think it does a really good job at showing how important alchemy is to its central government, along with kind of it being diverse, where it's not just a weapon of destruction. It can be used for various things. We see that with Nina and Alexander, with creating chimeras and transfusions of that element, where it can be twisted and turned in multiple different ways. And I think that's kind of an interesting way of doing something in that society, where something like the only one that kind of sticks out to me a little bit like that is Black Clover, where in their world, every single person has some form of magic except for the main character. But there's like levels. So like if you're like a level 1 mage and your power is like earth, like you're good at farming. It helps you farm better. But like you're not level 3 where you're shooting like rock missiles for war and stuff like that. Like I think that's like an example where kind of like the intertwining of the power system is ingrained in its society. But with Full Metal, I think it kind of does it in a way where I think it's a little bit more with its context, where it's rare, but it's not so rare that people don't know about it. It's ingrained in their government. It's ingrained in their workforce. And I really enjoyed that aspect of Full Metal.
Yeah, I completely agree, because, if there were, let's say 10% of the population or whatever was magic, that would greatly affect how, government and everything was run. Like, you have to be regulated, right? There's like control over that. And like there are people who decide not to do that, who work on like the outskirts of society. And then there are, alchemy itself has rules built into it. And then there are the rules that society opposes on alchemy, and those are at odds occasionally. Edward Elric can like, he fights, but he can also help build things and make supplies when needed and stuff. And so there's a lot of intertwining, as you said, and I think that's really cool. I really like that example from Black Clover, right? Because like it's always bothered me in shows that have like magic systems and stuff, especially when they're like pretty common, that someone's like still using a shovel or whatever, and it's just like, you don't have to do that. You can.
Yeah, it's kind of cool what they do in Black Clover. So, like, for instance, I don't know if like their magic is earth, but just for whatever, like they're able to, like, instead of like actually using like a hoe to farm the land, they're using like their earth magic to control the hoe to farm the land. Like, they're not actually doing manual labor, and like that goes forward in a bunch of different aspects with different types of magic. So it's interesting because like it makes sense. Where like if you're a level 1 mage, you're not as strong as a level 3 mage, you're probably going to be lower on the totem pole, and then your class system, I guess, is reflected off that. So like, I guess it's maybe a good example of world building. The stronger you are, like the more powerful, rich, and stuff you are, and it makes sense because you can control better, I guess, in terms of like its magic system. So I get, like, it's one thing that, I mean, for as much as Black Clover gets like shit on, and rightfully so for some aspects, I'm a huge fan of its magic system and kind of how it's ingrained in their world.
Yeah, that's and I think that sort of takes me to the what I guess I sort of view the core of like world building is that a lot of shows have like central tropes and stuff.
Yep.
But to me, the world building shines when you really can highlight and expand upon the ways that your world is different, right? So like Black Clover has its unique magic system, and there's a lot of battle shonen with magic systems,
for sure.
But do all of them go into how those magic systems help farmers? Probably not. And so that's something that gives Black Clover that edge as far as world building goes. It's the same thing with just say like a mecha or something, or I guess like a political drama would be better. But like, there are some shows where you just know there's a good side and a bad side. And the reason I started with mecha because I was like thinking of Gundam, right? And then you have shows that like really try to build that like political landscape and like make you understand where like all the different factions are and everything. And I like that. I like that extra effort. There's nothing wrong with good guys, bad guys. Like, I think that's fine. But it's also interesting to know, like, okay, this group is the antagonist, but they came from this, and this is why they think that. And everyone likes that depth, and you don't even need to do it right before they die, like in Demon Slayer. You can, build that up over time.
I guess I can play off that of, what shows do X better than other ones. And we talked about this before, and I know it's talked about a lot in our Discord, and something that I bring up a lot of times is Log Horizon in terms of the worlds of Isekai, where the penalties for death, I think, is a huge thing in Isekais, where sometimes it's playful and means nothing. So something like Bofuri, to the opposite scale of something like SAO, where if you die, you die. So
you die in the game, you die in real life.
If he dies, he dies. So I think like on a scale, we have 0 to 100 essentially. But then there's shows like Log Horizon. I think what does it so well is introduce this mechanic where if you die, you start to lose memories of your prior life. And so what not only is like that aspect, I think, a little cool, what it dives deeper into is sort of the psychology of death inside of the game. So you have people who don't want to forget where they came from. They want to win this game. They want to get out of this world. They want to retain everything. And then you have the polar opposites, where you have essentially a clan of maniacs who are so obsessed with the concept of like losing your memory, forgetting who you are, going crazy, that it turns them into essentially these psychopathic like PvPers inside of the game. And it does something so unique to it because a lot of times the penalties for death are either on one, it's usually one scale or the other. And this one I think does a really fun medium where it's a serious consequence. Losing memories of your prior life to some people might be more than, winning the lottery. But then there's some people where, maybe they're playing the games to forget who they are in real life anyway. And to me, I think that adds like another level of this like isekai game style that is, to be honest, I don't really know other examples outside of like the extremes on each side.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't. Log Horizon is super interesting, and I'm going to bounce off your idea, but then I want to talk about the world that Log Horizon is basing itself on. Because at first, I thought Log Horizon didn't have particularly great world building, but then I sort of talked to some people and flipped how I was thinking about it in my head, and now I'm in the camp that it does.
Yeah. Let's go.
But I think you're absolutely correct that like this death system, to like go with what I like, right? As you've mentioned, you see that everywhere. People are willing to be a little more risky sometimes because the penalty for death isn't dying, right? It's not as permanent. There's a downside, but people, I know that you see characters take risks that they normally wouldn't take because they know, that what they're giving up, while it could be important to them, isn't their entire life. And on the other hand, you have the people who really need to hold on to their memories, who play it super tight, and then you have the people who, as you mentioned, like that's what they go out trying to die.
Yeah, you have WoW hardcore, and then you have Leroy Jenkins.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's really neat. What I think is interesting about the world building, and what I think makes it so unique for Log Horizon, right? You either have games for Isekai, like for the RPG Isekai stuff, you either have a game or you have like a death game, right? So like something like SAO or any normal Isekai, I guess sounds like ReZero. If you die, or Konosuba, actually. Anyways, point being, you're either in like a reality where you die if you die, or you're playing a game with your friends, like in Shangri-La or Beaufort or something like that. And you don't want to die because that's bad for your gaming, but you can take your headset off at the end of the day. And so while SAO sort of is like a game, it has that same death condition. What's interesting about Log Horizon is that it blends reality and game in a very interesting way. So this is why I was originally thinking to myself, I don't think the world building is that good, because one of the major revelations they have is that if you cook food, it tastes good.
Yep.
But then I thought that like I'm not supposed to view this as the real world. I'm supposed to view it as a game, and this is one of its ways of like showing that the game systems aren't always the best solution, which I think is neat. Because there's some experimentation that is involved. Because some things behave like they did when they were playing the game, but some things are different, like NPCs and stuff. Like you see NPCs becoming real people, basically.
Yeah, it's like AI or something inside the game.
Yeah, and like they join parties and stuff when they couldn't do that before. So like now that you're in the game, they're like actually people. But
and
then
they're
also
viewed as people too.
Yes. Yeah. And then but also sometimes there are game mechanics that like that work like the game. Like you can still prep food like the game, you still have a menu and stuff. So like that blending of the two I think is really interesting. And you've watched more Log Horizon than me, so are there any examples you can think of like past the first season where that comes into play with that?
They do a really interesting political thing in season 3 that I don't even know if it's necessarily world building, but it maybe in a sense where this is going to be spoilers for season 2 of Log Horizon, where they defeat the big bad boss and they complete the raid and it's over, and now it's a new sense of it's sort of like the next phase of their world, and so they have to decide how they're going to move forward with this new world. And they decide, and to me, actually, I do think this is world building, that they decide, I think the most logical thing is they do an election. And like,
okay,
to me, I think that's, I think a lot of times where you see it in, you haven't seen Gurren Lagann, have you?
I've seen one episode.
Okay. Something along the lines of like, the hero wins, the hero is now in charge of the new world and stuff like that. You see that a lot of times where I defeated the demon king or whatever, and now I'm emperor of whatever, or I'm the general of whatever. In Log Horizon, they don't do that because, like, in their world, it doesn't make sense that, you know, Shiro might be the smartest person in the raid, but he's not the smartest person to run a country. So they come to like the logical conclusion of, well, we should elect a new official because it's a new world, essentially, like that. And I think that's like an emphasis I like in my world building when you have stuff like that, where it's not just person does X and now they are the hero, they are the person. This is like a completely different take on it, and it builds the world because it seems like the people inside the world are using logic to apply, like, from past before. If you want a new mayor, you elect a new mayor. You don't just pick somebody. And they know that from their previous world that they have a democracy and they vote and stuff in real life. Why don't we do that in the real game? And I think that's like a cool little thing that Log Horizon does than any other like Isekai, or I guess it's just like in general. We really don't see like a campaign arc in shows, what we do in Log Horizon.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely world building, right? Because that's building like the political system, and then like I imagine you see effects of that, right? Because like from what I've seen too, they like implement economic things that happen.
They do taxes, yeah,
and that affects how people interact with Shiro, interact with the game, right? So like that is all world building. I mean, they're building a society, right? So they're literally world building, but like in their real lives.
Yeah. But then we run into like, this is where I think people run into where like, is this boring content for some people, or is it you like me? And I'm like, holy shit, they're doing an election. Like, this is so cool.
You know who I think world building like really hits for?
Tell me.
Is people who like reading wikis, right? Like if you really like reading, like if you like watch a show and then you read the wiki and you're like, oh, he did, you know, the author said at a panel that this is how this, you know, like you just like read all of that. Like that's who likes the election arc, you know, like that's who's like, oh, I fucking love that they explained why they're, you know, doing ranked choice voting instead of first past the post or whatever. You know, I think that is pretty cool. Like I think, you know, if you really like getting into that sort of like nitty gritty stuff, yeah, I think Log Horizon is just like a very good example. Let's contrast it a bit, because I kind of want to. We talked about this before, and so you are in the SAO. We're going to say season 1, first 12 episodes of SAO. Minecraft arc has not great world building, right? That's your take.
Yeah, there's aspects of it that I don't enjoy.
Yeah, okay. So that I very much might agree with. But I do want to say, like, it has similar, like, to me, it actually does have pretty similar things to Log Horizon. And Minecraft is only like 12 episodes, right? So you're definitely not going to get as in depth, and that means it's like not as good. But thinking about what I liked about SAO, I feel like a lot of it was sort of the world building, because, you know, I think the game makes enough sense. I think that the way that they show the systems in the game and how they work is interesting. You know, you have like your skills, and like they sort of take an opposite approach where they like keep the gamified stuff, right? So like Asuna cooks by like holding up a knife and like clicking a button, and it like makes like a perfect meal, which I think is fun. Like I think that's neat. You know, and then like she had trouble using menus and stuff, where in Log Horizon they sort of slowly shy away from that stuff as like they get more ingrained in this world.
Yep.
Right? It feels like the world is pulling them in. In SAO, I think there's a lot of reminders that it is a game, and I think that's a pretty good intentional choice, because they're trapped there, right? Like, and they are in Log Horizon, but it's also in Log Horizon. Do we know why they got trapped yet? Is that
no?
Okay. So in Aincrad, right, we know why that happened. It was malicious. It wasn't like magic or anything, right? It was just some dude being a psycho. And so like I think a lot of the stuff about SAO, like I get how the game works. I understand how the world works. It makes the world feel like threatening a lot of the times. But what do you have issues with in it?
It's more my world building negativity on like SAO is like the nerve gear itself and sort of how that can just like kill people, I guess.
Yeah.
Where like I'm picturing a world where like if you wanted to have this machine equipment to essentially have the ability to end somebody, it would have to be like the Matrix, where you need to be like plugged into your cerebellum in order for like the program to actually kill you. And like SAO, they just like wear a headset, and to me, that kind of like loses. When I think of bad world building, it's when I like lose immersion from its world. Like,
Yes.
what's the context of its world, and was it doing, and then it loses me. So like if I wear a Oculus Rift in real life, I'm never going to think it's going to kill me unless I'm playing some form of like Wii Sports and I run into my television and I get electrocuted. Like, yeah, like I'm one of those old people that are like thinking I'm on a roller coaster and I like jump. Like that's the only way I think like an Oculus Rift is going to kill me. And it's because like I'm such a like a, you know, I play a lot of MMOs, I play a lot of games and stuff like that, where like I have a like predisposed idea of its world, where it's different if you're actually sucked into the world compared to wearing like a VR headset, because so many of these like augmented reality full dive games, the penalty for death is never actually death except for SAO, which does, I think in a sense does make it, that aspect makes it good. I like the uniqueness, and that if technology ever gets to that point, you know, we can experience more realistic like feelings, whether it's like the wind blowing in our face or, you know, something along like those lines with how technology goes. But it's like the idea of it with a Oculus Rift on my head killing me doesn't make sense. Like, what if someone just pulled off the headset really fast? How's it gonna kill me? Like,
it emits high powered microwave speed.
Yeah, but like, what if you pull it off like really fast? Like, I don't know. It's just like over 2 years, like somebody couldn't figure it out. We figured out a vaccine for COVID in like 8 months or something like that. Like, they couldn't figure out, like, they couldn't like hack this system and stuff like that. So
I mean, I will say, do think that's dumb. What I will say is harder probably to pull it off than the light, but like, you know, I do agree. Yeah. Ultimately, I don't necessarily know if pulling it off really fast would be the solution.
Maybe a bad, but the idea of just like it's more just the idea of wearing this headset. I'm losing the immersion of its like. I picture myself in like. You ever see like in the malls they have those like big ass pods like you do like VR games, like that's what I would picture myself, like I'm stuck in the pod and then that's how it kills me. It's an Iron Maiden of some sort. That's where I could have more immersion of like this style of death game than
so you want to see like a jack that goes in the back of their neck like the Matrix.
Yeah, the Matrix. Yeah, no, literally like the Matrix. Like I just want the Matrix, I guess.
The world building in the Matrix is pretty bad after the first movie.
A little bit,
okay, so like I guess this whole let's I'm gonna pivot here because I don't have a ton of examples in my head, but I think you talking about this might help me out. You know, because you're definitely the hater of the podcast, and it's not me. I'm not the
not
hater.
Only am I the easiest grader, the most like casual like grader of all these shows, I'm also the biggest hater. I'm both somehow.
Yes, I gave Yuri is my job at 9. So
and on Dead Luck.
I did.
Yep. That's what you get for calling me out a hater. I'm gonna bring up your Undead Luck score.
I got peer pressured into that. The star scene is really cool, though. I guess spoiler alerts for people watching the anime. Good world building scene, by the way. We won't go into it because it's spoilers for currently airing anime, but really good world building scene. Do you have any examples of shows that had world building moments where you were just like, took you out of it? You don't like, you know, elements of it, or you have issues with it? Yeah, hit me.
Yeah, so the biggest one that stands out to me is in My Hero Academia, the police owning firearms. And not only owning firearms, using firearms. Because the world of My Hero, the quirks that I would say the majority of the heroes have are something along the lines of being like an attribute boost. They're not. There are some where like All Might, who is Superman. He's super strong, super fast. He can punch through 1,000 walls. Then you have someone like the girl who can like levitate people with gravity and stuff like that. Where like her power is useful, but like is she on the same level as a hero as All Might? I think it's not. So to me, my biggest issue with like My Hero is like 97% of these heroes just lose to a Glock. And I find it hard to believe that when you are, say, in season 4, they are raiding a compound, it's a combination of the police and the heroes. And they go in, and they don't go in like guns blazing against some of these heroes that would straight up lose to a gun. Like,
yeah,
it loses my, like I said before, my biggest problem with world building is when I lose the immersion of the world. And something like that to me, it was like, if you make it something along the lines of, for example, X-Men. So in X-Men, I think it's like 2. There's a scene where Magneto is leading a group of mutants against like a military force. Magneto has the power to stop metal, so he uses his power when they're shooting at him with bullets. He can stop them. He's essentially another Matrix reference. He's Neo. He's stopping the bullets.
Yes.
So it's like, to me, in that world building sense, Magneto is such a pivotal part of this like raid because he's able to stop the resistance of gunfire, and like that's what's so important. In My Hero, there's nothing along those lines where how does Frog Girl stop an AK-47? Like, to me, 99 times out of 100, the guy with the AK-47 is beating Frog Girl. And I was actually doing some research on this, and apparently there's like a agreement to not use weapons in the like as a villain. It's why Stain is such a outlier of villains in My Hero, and actually why he's kind of like shunned in the villain world, because he uses knives, which to me, I don't understand the logic, but it's stuff along those lines where Stain makes sense. He uses a weapon to kill people. He uses knives to kill people. That, to me, makes sense in the world. But then, if you have access to weapons, why wouldn't you use them in the world? Or if they do use them in the world, how do you counter them? And that's why I like the Magneto scene so much in X-Men, because it counters this thing that can stop the majority of mutants. But then, like, if you're like close range against somebody with a gun and you're Frog Girl, that's a completely different story. So that's where I run into issues with my world building, is losing the immersion. And then we can also maybe go into it like Assholes, Deus Ex Machina, stuff like that, where something comes from nothing and it's not explained why. But I guess I get your take on the My Hero thing.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So I said I wasn't going to do this, but Worm is a web novel by Wildbow.
You mother.
And
you promised me you wouldn't talk about Worm.
I'm sorry. But heroes in that world don't use guns except for one, who she's gun themed, and she had to sign a bunch of paperwork to be able to use guns. And it's explained in that world that that's like a marketing decision on their part. Like, for heroes, they want heroes to be marketable. Villains, on the other hand, often use guns. So you've read some Worm, right?
8 volumes.
Okay, so like Tattletale, it has a power that lets her like intuit things. She's very good at like making deductions, basically, but completely useless in combat as far as her actual ability to fight people. So she carries around a Glock, because it's very
very useful.
You can shoot someone, and that there's a lot of heroes that will be fine, as you mentioned, like All Might would be fine, if he gets shot, maybe. And Todoroki and like Bakugo could probably put out enough firepower that it's just too much for some dude with a gun, but like support heroes like Gravity or whatever, you make like a good point there. Do you think that the main failing in My Hero is that they don't, it's not like guns, it's that the guns exist and they're not utilized in the proper way that they should be in that world, right? Because I guess it would make sense to me that the kids don't have guns, right? But
I would agree, yeah. But there are adult heroes for sure.
Yeah, so who's the touchy disintegrating guy? Shikigami?
Oh, that's not Dabi. What's his name?
Shigaraki.
Shigaraki, that's his name.
Yeah. So like Shigaraki needs to get in really close to kill anyone, right? So like if the police had guns, but like Shigaraki, who's a villain who can kill you with like one touch basically, but also needs to be up close to get it there. If he had a gun, do you think you might like that better if they were utilized more commonly and it wasn't this question of like, why aren't we using AK-47s against this?
I think it's more along the lines of why introduce it to the world to begin with than why don't people use it? Because like it's so centered around being a hero and these heroes versus villains story type where like the police can just be like the moderators of the minor things, and then the big things are left to the heroes, and don't show the police with guns and stuff like that. Like you could show them with batons or something like that, and then it'd be perfectly fine. It's more along the lines of like they introduce it to the world. Why introduce it if it's not going to be used?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I do think that it's probably like it's supposed to be our world just with like superpowers, right? So like guns exist is I assume. I know I'm not. I think you're correct. I'm just saying. I'm guessing why they're in the world, right? Because the author was just like, for the same reason televisions exist, I guess, because they exist.
Yes,
you know what I mean. Like that's sort of why. I do think that the way that My Hero does stuff, it would probably be more interesting without guns. But I gotta say, I do like superhero media where guns are involved. Like Batman vs. Superman, not a great movie. Watching Batman shotgun a guy in the chest, pretty cool. Yeah. Batman doesn't kill people.
Well, like in Batman, it's explained how, like obviously he's like, why does he have like this insane suit? Well, he's a billionaire and he can create the most high-tech things. And why does his suit block bullets? So it's because he's super rich and he has the best technology in the world. Like it's minor. It can maybe be whatever, but like that's explained at least why in Batman he can essentially stop bullets with his armor.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. Someone who's like a villain, right? Like I do think that there's some value in like an agreement between heroes and villains not to use weapons. Like I think that some sort of code like that makes sense. But I also think someone who's just like actively trying to kill teenagers would also just use a gun.
Yeah. No, for sure. But it's like I'll rampage through the town. I'll destroy buildings, probably crush innocent civilians or whatever, like along those lines while I'm causing my rampage. But a Glock? Absolutely not. Like I will not do that. I'll cause billions of dollars in property damage, but I won't own a gun.
Yeah, like I'll touch someone so that they slowly disintegrate because my hands are caustic or whatever.
Yep.
But I won't just shoot them. That would be barbaric.
Terrible.
Okay. I like that. That's a pretty good example.
Another one for me, I guess this also applies to like the context of the show is Classroom of the Elite. When you have the word elite in its title. The school that they are in is supposed to be for this elite academy for, whatever that they are. Like maybe they're super smart, super athletic. It's Danganronpa. But when like everybody is just so dumb. Like how can I be immersed in this world if everybody is just idiots?
Okay, so one, you just reminded me of a similar example. I didn't hate that in Classroom of the Elite because their class was like dumb, like they're the bad class, and like
but like Aina Koji exists, so
well,
and he's not dumb. He's essentially a cyborg compared to the rest of these people.
That's the bit, though, right?
It is a bit, but he still makes dumb decisions too. I guess you can blame it on teenagers or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what the dumb decisions are, right? Like, I definitely made dumb decisions as a teenager, but then, like, also, like, not
Yeah,
I don't
no,
know.
me too. I was a teenager. Yeah.
Yeah, like, but I don't know. It's weird to describe how they're dumb. Like, they weren't stupid, they were dumb, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
it's White Album 2 all over again. Where in the world you have three people who make logical decisions throughout the entire story, and then at the end they're just like, I guess I'm stupid, I'm gonna make every mistake in the book, and just pulls every ounce of immersion I had in the story, any investment I had in the story, and throws it out the window because it doesn't apply to anything that was shown prior to what I was watching.
Mm-hmm. My version of this is the world building and No Game No Life.
Oh, I was thinking about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, you have this world that is completely, like, the world is games, right? The games are the currency, basically. They're how you gain power. They're how you do political deals. Everything is based on games, and if you can win them, and how you can, like, cheat subtly and stuff. And then you have two people who come in from our world, which is not based around games, and they're better at games than everyone in this world, and everyone in that world is, like, pretty actively bad at games.
Yes.
Like, like, I think of the chess scene a lot. Like, one, I think, just like how Sora convinces the opponent's chess players, their pieces, to, like, turn against them is one, the opposite of the point of chess. But two, someone who is playing this game, who made Sora play this game, would surely be aware that the pieces are cognizant, right? Like, that's what took me out of it. It's like, if you were playing living chess, wouldn't you know that you have to, like, care about the morale of your pieces? And, like, especially if you had been in that world, like, it's not crazy that Sora figured it out really quickly, but it's crazy that the lady wasn't expecting it. Like, she wasn't aware of it, even though it's her game. She challenged him to the game. Like, so I got taken out a few times in No Game No Life because you have the premise of the world, but the actions of the characters go against that premise a number of times.
And the rules of the world too. Like,
yes.
the main rule of No Game No Life is, like, you're not allowed to cheat, and then they cheat. Like,
as they astutely point out, it's don't get caught cheating is the first rule.
That's true, but, like, also, like, God is involved all the time in the story, so, like, it does. This is one of the shows where, like, are you watching it for the world building, or are you watching it for the silly antics? And that's, to me, like, when I was watching No Game No Life, I wasn't fully invested in the world. I was more intrigued with sort of, like, the games that they were playing, I guess, and not focusing on, like, everything surrounding it. It's like I wasn't immersed in the world to begin with. I guess it's more it's tough because it's like kind of picking and choosing.
Well, yeah, but I think you can do that, right? Because, like, I did that with Classroom of the Elite. Are you right that it's arbitrary and kind of dumb? Like, yeah, but I had a good time because I went in expecting it to be arbitrary and dumb. Like,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Because, like, I think, as we mentioned, world building is great and important, but it's not always the most important thing. You can have a good and enjoyable show that has bad or no world building. In my opinion, at least.
No, for sure. Yeah. Because it's one of those things where, like, I guess, is the story trying to present me with a bigger, broader world? Are they presenting me with this information that I should be invested into this world? And if they are, then I'm invested. But if it's something along the lines of, like, Dragon Ball, where it's like they're going to fight each other, and when they need to get stronger, they're going to do push-ups, I'm like, sure. Like, I'll run with it.
Yeah, because I think, like, so, someone who enjoys No Game No Life is watching it to see what zany antics they get into and how they cheat the system to win the game. And it's like they're expecting this rule bending. I love rules. I'm a huge rule fan. I think games are good because they have rules. So, like, I hate it when people cheat. So, this is, like, one of my biggest issues with Kakaguri was that, like, that you can't write someone to be good at games. You just have to write someone who's good at cheating.
Yep.
And I feel like almost every game-based anime is that, like, exactly. And that always bothers me. But same thing with, like, Dragon Ball, right? Like, you're watching it because you want to see how the power how is he going to get out of this? What new ability is he going to get? Is it going to seem cool? And do you care about the fucking political ramifications of the Cell tournament and what happened after that? Like, no, you don't. You don't care about that. That's not why you're watching the show. And so I think that, it depends why you're watching, right? Because, like, again, if you're watching, I don't know, Toradora, you're not expecting world building. And so I think you're right. It depends on what you expect. And that's going to be pretty personal, because when I watched No Game No Life, I got invested in the world and the rules, and then I found that to be disappointing. Whereas someone who just likes the characters and the games will probably have a great time, right? Yeah. It's a highly rated show. So, that's probably what people enjoy. It wasn't what I was focusing on, and so it hurt my enjoyment of it. Just like something that, as you had mentioned, right? Like, if you have season 3 of Log Horizon, you love the election thing. Someone who doesn't care about all that minutia and wants to see the characters bounce off of each other in different ways, or see how they're put into like combat, or maybe whatever, like different aspects of a show, would not like that the same way sure. That
yeah. I want to talk about shows that we like that just has good world building for maybe a various different reasons. Like some of our favorite shows that just do world building great. It could be something minor that just really sticks out to you, or something that I think it just encapsulates to me. One that always sticks out to me is Made in Abyss. I think how they set the entire story from the beginning is great, where we have this brand new discovery in the world that a society is built around, whereas this is dangerous treasure hunting adventure, and our main character lives in an orphanage essentially. And so it makes sense that when you go treasure hunting in an unknown land and it's filled with monsters and poison and stuff, that there's a really good chance you're going to die. So if you have a bunch of people coming to this world to become treasure hunters, they might have kids, they might be married, and if you die, they might need to go to the orphanage. And just kind of like how Made in Abyss sets that up, I think we're talking fiction. I think it's cool that there's like an orphanage filled with kids with dead parents, because like in a sense it makes sense to the world. I like how it's like a society gets built around the outside of this abyss.
Yeah, right. So you have this thing that it offers exploration, maybe untold wealth, lots of new. You see later on some people who are doing some really interesting things.
Yes.
Interesting with quotation marks for our audio listeners, experimenting with the effects of the abyss and stuff on people in order to find energy sources and stuff, very ethical things. So you have things like that, but then you also, you have this orphanage because so many people have gone, and there's a layer where you just can't come back to, right? Like after you reach a certain point, you can never come back, as far as I understand.
So if you're talking about like layer 6, it's like there's an exception. So the only people that outside of, I guess the only people that have like escaped the 6th layer are Osen, but she lives in the abyss. Like she's able to escape it, but she has to live there. And then Bone Druid, who has genetically modified himself in order to move on. And then you see Rika's mom. They essentially have to use an artifact in order to escape. So like you can escape, but like it's
difficult.
99.9% of people die essentially once you reach a certain layer. But yeah, like you can't escape is a good point. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's neat, right? And you see the different ways people adapt to the different layers. You see, people who choose to stay there in like different areas and why they do. And you see the effects of people who go deeper on previous levels sometimes, like with Bone Druid, right? You reach, people who are affected by him before you get to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, of course, really interesting. I also think, and this is an aspect we haven't talked about a ton, but like, as far as inspiring wonder, because I think one of the great thing about world building is a desire to, like, if it's good, you have a desire to know more about that world, right? There are things that I think might have pretty bad technical world building, but what they do is inspire a desire to like learn as much about that world as possible
Mhm.
and stuff. So like not anime, but something like Harry Potter, right? Like if you examine that closely, it's actually like really bad world building. None of it makes any sense, but like so many people read that and were inspired by it. And what Made in Abyss does is have that inspiration, I feel like, and also just be good.
Yeah.
And be
Yeah,
well
yeah,
written.
yeah.
But like the fauna, the ecology, and stuff of that. Like we've talked a lot about like the political systems in the cities and social structures here, but the abyss is like a natural ish, at the very least, a
Yeah.
geographical like phenomena, and there's different ecosystems in it, and they play off of each other a bit, like in those layers between like in the boundary between layers and stuff, right? You can see like interactions and stuff, and there's a lot of new danger, and there's like cataloging
Got it.
of I did it, of the new species and stuff, and I think that's cool. So like, what is your favorite? Like, what do you see in Made in Abyss from like that aspect that makes you just go like, love this world, like big fan?
Yeah. So think of like the ocean, where
Yeah.
there are layers that we physically cannot reach. Where there's too much pressure. If we go down there, we just get crumpled up. Or if we try to come up, our lungs explode or whatever. So it's like the unknown of that world that is so fascinating. And I also like it in a sense where there are sometimes we're like, if you think of it like levels in like a video game, we're like level 1 is the easiest, level 2 is a little bit harder than level 1, but level 3 is going to be harder than level 2. Made in Abyss is not necessarily like that. Where like each level sort of has like its own thing with it that you can kind of navigate. And sometimes like one person is going to be more accustomed to a certain level than the next. And you see that with Osen living where she is, and then season 2, where we have a community of people living in a specific level. It's explained why they're living in that level as well, but sort of that unknown where we are still discovering things in the ocean probably for the next 1,000 years because it's so vast, it's so unexplored. And one thing with Main Abyss is we never know what's around the corner because it's so unique. It's so interesting with each level, each monster, each environmental trap, or the atmosphere in level 6 or something along those lines. Like everything can be unknown. And that's what really stands out to me, where there are sometimes in adventure stories where we know in order to get to B, we have to do A, and then after B comes C, and we know like where the story is progressing. In Made in Abyss, I have no idea what's going to happen next. And like that's the beauty of it. It's not just the characters, it's the environments, the ecology, it's the geography. It's so much wrapped into one, which is the Abyss itself. That's just so just next level stuff for me.
Yeah, and I think an important note, at least for me, is that everything that comes next in Made of Abyss makes sense and feels like it builds off of things that we knew previously, or none of it seems out of left field, right?
Yeah.
Like I think that it's a cohesive world, and the monsters we see seem like they fit their environments, you know what I mean? Like, and the threat of the Abyss lives up to what we've heard about it, and what they have to do to survive is indicative of what layer they're on, right? So like I just think that is what's good, because I like that you can explore, but as you're exploring, it all makes sense when you watch it, because I think that like consistency is really important, and some amount of predictability about what could or couldn't happen also is important for world building.
Yeah, as well as like, especially in Main Abyss, like we know Rika and Reg are going to run into an issue. But it's like you never know what that issue is going to be, because like we see it in season 1. Sometimes it's a giant monster. Sometimes they have to fight a giant monster and shoot a laser beam at it. But then sometimes it's like poison gas, where like it catches Rika off guard and she almost dies. It's along, or like just like the monsters, but also like the characters that are living in this world, because it's a sustainable habitat for multiple different like ecosystems essentially. So we see it with Danachi, with her background and why she's there, along with like Mitty, and then in season 2, an entire community living in the abyss. But like it's just so well explained where this is obviously made up and it's hard to comprehend. And like if you gave me 100 years and 1,000 notepads, I could never think of something like this. But like this person thought of it, came up with reasonings behind it, and it all makes sense. It's a reason why I just fell in love with it. We're like we're talking about before, we're like the context matters. Is this world trying to present me with something bigger than just a character? Is it trying to present to me something within this world? And that's what Made Abyss is. It's presenting me the whole thing. The whole abyss is the show, pretty much. And if the world building was bad in Made Abyss, I'd probably think it's trash. Like, take away the cool animations and the characters and stuff like that. If the world building didn't make sense, I would fall off of this show really fast. But it's not. And it's why one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite shows of all time.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that the Abyss is in a way a character in that show.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
I absolutely agree. It's like, it's the main antagonist of the story is the Abyss.
Yeah. And I think that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do like an environmental challenge like that, I feel like the world building is so important.
Anything that sticks out to you? That like a show that just maybe does one thing really great, or a show that does a whole lot of things fantastic?
Yeah, so I mentioned this before. I'd like to talk about like Psycho-Pass a bit. I think, Psycho-Pass does sort of the dystopian sci-fi thing super well. You have the Sybil system, which is this automated crime fighting system, and you see how that affects a bunch of things in this world. It affects how people decision make and everything. You have like Akane unable to pull the trigger on the manual mode of the Dominator at one point to kill Makishima because she is so used to she doesn't have to make judgment, right? The system makes judgment. People don't have to make their own decisions. And you see that in how people go about their lives, right? In this world, like it starts off with this where you have like a test that tells you what you can and can't do. That's based on like your score that like, this all-seeing AI affects. And you see people who, if they make certain decisions in their life, are confined to certain roles and everything. And so like that is, and it is for like playing outside of the system too much, right? Like if you make your own decisions. So like it enforces, like the way that it enforces certain behavior is interesting. The way that you can see that it makes people make decisions is interesting. I also think that the way that it informs like the main antagonist Makishima is really interesting because it's sort of like a bad versus bad sort of thing. Like you have to decide which of these evils is worse. Is it this overlord AI system, or is it this, insane serial killer who's trying to, make everyone kill each other or whatever? And, Akane has to deal with that. And to me, it's just every decision, everything in that world feels informed by other aspects of that world. And that's sort of why I like it so much. There's a lot of, like Makishima talks about analog versus digital media, and in a world, there's like some stuff like that too. Like, I like physical books more than I like ebooks, but I don't think anyone is like passionate about it as like he was. And I think that's because of how like he's fighting this like digital brain, basically this decision maker. Like everything in the world is so digitized that like having that physical media is so much more important to him. So like even intricacies and like quirks of the people who are opposed to the main system are informed by it, which I think is good. I really like that. I really enjoy that aspect of it.
Have you seen the movie Equilibrium?
Yes.
Okay. Because when I watched Equilibrium for the first time, yeah. Like I got those vibes when I was watching Psycho-Pass. I'm just like, society runs on a set of rules dictated by I guess in Equilibrium, a higher like ranking government, or this one it's like a higher ranking AI system, and it's like what's more important, like the safety or the free will? And I like that like conundrum that people have to get into of like, is chaos worth losing this utopia that we live in? And I think that's like a fun parallel to bounce off the characters during like the show.
Yeah, so Equilibrium and Psychopaths definitely have some like parallels, right? Like even with the physical media, right? Like Sean Bean gets caught at the beginning with like, because like art is forbidden in that world, and it's not forbidden in Psychopaths, but some forms of art are like not encouraged, right? Like going to like the rock shows and stuff like raise your crime coefficient or whatever.
Because rock music is bad.
Yes, and yeah, so like I mean, it's, you know, it's like I would spread cloth under your feet, but I, being poor, have only my dreams. I've spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly because you tread on my dreams. And then he gets shot.
You memorize that too. You didn't even Google that.
It's definitely not on my other monitor. It's not the Scottish poetry library that told me what the last stanza of that poem is. But yeah, I think, I don't know, I like those dystopian worlds. I think that Psychopaths probably does it better than Equilibrium, even though Equilibrium has gun katas, and that's really fucking cool.
So cool. Oh man,
we need that in an anime. We need an anime with gun katas.
What if there already?
There has to be. I mean, it's so cool.
It's like prevalent in Final Fantasy, and there's a Final Fantasy anime, I'm pretty sure. I wonder if it's an Advent Children or something. I haven't seen that movie.
The fight scenes in Equilibrium are so good,
bro. When he like jumps, he surfboards a door, and then while he's surfboarding the door, he's doing his thing. I'm just like, God damn, Christian Bale. This is Howl? Damn. So good.
It's oh my god. I think that movie is like unknown because it came out, or lesser known because it came out the same time The Matrix did.
Yeah.
And like, you know,
hot take, I like Equilibrium more than The Matrix.
I think I like The Matrix more, but like if you factor in the fact that 2 and 3 exist for The Matrix, I like Equilibrium.
Okay, yeah. I like Matrix 1 the best, and then yeah.
And then Equilibrium, and then every John Wick movie, and then
ooh, we get.
You don't like John Wick?
I love John Wick.
Oh, okay.
I thought you were putting Equilibrium above John Wick.
Oh, no, I mean, that's probably wrong. Oh, God, I wish we could... Okay, this is an anime podcast. I wanted to ask anyone about the world building in John Wick and if they think it's good or not. Because I've been torn on that. I feel like sometimes it's a bit random, but it's also neat and evocative, and, like, that's valuable.
Yeah, you know, like, with the Continental, that loses me a little bit, where it's, like, this sacred holy ground, and then they kind of just, like... It's kind of, because of John Wick, the rules are a little bit thrown out. Like, he is so above everybody else that this sanctuary of rules and hideouts for all these other assassins, the Continental is sort of just like those things get set aside for John Wick. It's a little bit extra, I guess, but
yeah, he breaks the rules, and then everyone was like, "This guy broke the rules, and the only way we can kill him is to break all the rules." Mm. So we're gonna have to do that.
Yeah.
And then
it just seems really sudden, and it's like all over the world. All the other Continentals of the rules are broken. It's like, I guess, fuck it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it starts with like the Russian mob, and he was a hitman. And then by the time I'm only halfway through John Wick 4 because I started watching it on a plane. But by the time John Wick 3 and 4 happen, you know, you're like in Tokyo or you're in Kyoto, and then you're in like, you know, somewhere in Africa. And then, you know, you're like, everyone knows everything. Everyone is an assassin. Yep. Every single human is actually secretly an assassin.
Fun fact, 4/6 of the Discord are 2/3 are assassins.
Yes. It was, I don't know. I mean, I think it's neat. I don't know if it's good.
It's neat. It's for sure neat. Yeah. It's like the world building of Fast and Furious. It's like, you know, they fucking jump out of the towers in Abu Dhabi. It's like, who cares? Like, fuck it. Everything is thrown out the window. It doesn't matter.
Is there anything else we want to hit before we wrap this up?
No, I guess I wanted to touch, I think we have to give like an honorable mention, obviously, to One Piece.
Yes.
You know, it's a show that we both have watched some of it, but it's not fully ingrained in our anime like backlog where we feel comfortable talking about it. However, I do want to acknowledge, like, from what I've seen, obviously One Piece has great world building, and so it's more of like a tip of the hat to One Piece.
Yeah, people that I trust say it has some of, if not the best world building in anime, and I have just never really delved into it. So there's that. And there's also plenty of other shows we mentioned. We sadly only have so much time. As much as I would love for Pete to publish this 10-hour podcast, where we just talk about every anime ever, we can't do that. So
let's talk about the world building in a place further than the universe.
Antarctica, is it real?
There were penguins flying in the show. 0 out of 10.
Yeah, that's... So, Pete, do you have any final world building thoughts?
No, I think we covered everything that I wanted to cover. To me, yeah, like I said before, to reiterate, when the story wants me to get involved into the world, that's when I resonate with world building the most. But it doesn't push aside anything like my enjoyment for the show. That's more than likely always going to come first. So things can sway my scoring, my rating on its world building, but I don't think it's necessarily the most important thing for me when going into a show. But it's honestly probably one of the most fun things to talk about and discuss. So I think it's great that we have so many different layers and elements and components to a story that we can dig into, that we didn't even touch on it, but like power systems with Nen. There's people who think it's the pinnacle of power systems and how it explains. And then we have Miles. So like, it's really great. Yeah, I'm setting you up for this one, but it's like it's fun how different parts of world building really resonate with people, and I think it varies with each individual on how they like their world building and what's important to them. So I like discussing it, and if you like discussing it, you should join our Discord. Links in the description below. Miles, did you have any final thoughts about world building?
Yeah, I think the most important part of world building, whether you like nitty gritty stuff like Pete and I do, or you just like a sense of adventure, is that the world draws you in. Whatever world that, if the author creates a world that makes you interested in that world and want to learn more about it and see more of it and wonder what the continent over is doing, then they did a good job world building. It doesn't matter if everything isn't physics. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't have if your power system's a little wonky, that's okay, really. I love the super technical stuff, right? Like, my favorite fantasy author, I said I want to do this, is Brandon Sanderson.
I want to do it, but I did it twice.
And, he has appendices at the end of his books that explain, like a fucking physics textbook, how his power system works. And I love that. Other people aren't going to like that, and that's A-okay. So as long as you feel like invested in a world and a world feels alive to you, I think that you can say that show had good world building for you. Mm-hmm. I just want to clarify my stance on Nen. Okay. I think that's a very good power system. I think it's very interesting. I think that it doesn't super play into the world building from what I've seen so far. I think that because it is so exclusive to such a few group of people, just like the top percent of the top percent of adventurers in that world, that you're not going to see the effects of it everywhere. And there are some, right? Like, with groups that have this power going and like genociding random people or whatever. But, to me, it doesn't play in the same way that like alchemy does to the world, or what you described with Black Clover. And so, like, to me, it's just not as integral of a part of the world building, but still a great power system.
I'm really intrigued when Witch Hat Atelier comes out on your stance on why like witches exist in their world, because I think they do something very unique to its world that I'm really looking forward to seeing people's reaction to it, and yours as well.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to get into it. I like witches.
So does Pat.
Yeah, second most in the Discord. I like witches. Yeah, so if you think that we missed something, or you have a show you just want to talk about the great world building of, leave a comment, come to our Discord, and talk about it with us. Yes. We would love to. We like talking all kinds of anime. Unless it's 86, then Pete will call you mid.
You mean 43? Let's talk about the world building about 86 for now. I'm not going to jump into that.
I guess, yeah. Yeah.
No.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
No. Okay, Pete. Do the final taking us away.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have made it this far and you want to support us, the best way to do so, like, comment, subscribe, leave a review on whatever platform you are watching or listening to us on. Next week for Watch Club, we will be reviewing Paranoia Agent, finishing out our Satoshi Kon catalog. Otherwise, outside Watch Club in 2 weeks, we will be reviewing with a special guest, and by we, I mean me and a special guest will be reviewing the new Ghibli film, The Boy and the Heron. So look forward to that. Otherwise, thank you so much, and we will see you next time. Peace!
Bye-bye!